Okay, so this is my second video. Last time I talked about motors and how people tend to obsess on treadmill motors to see, because they think that's the most critical part of the treadmill. But again, after you reach a certain size, most treadmill motors are going to be just fine. I will offer one caveat. Um, I have seen recently a few walking pads. They haven't existed very long, and I haven't really worked on hardly any of them because they're basically disposable. They're very cheap, so if one of them breaks, they don't call me to get it fixed. They just throw it away and get a new one. The motors in walking pads are incredibly small, and even if you are only going to be walking on them, because obviously they don't go to running speed, even that tiny size is still going to be a problem. So again, once you reach a certain size of motor, physically, that size, I'm not even talking about horsepower rating, but physical size, generally speaking, any drive motor in a treadmill is going to be fine. The limiting factor on the vast majority of treadmills are belts, the belt that you walk on. And here you can see I have an assortment of belts, and in a minute we'll go through them and I'll kind of show you some of the differences. But what and I guess what I want to briefly consider at the moment is what is the danger of a worn walking belt? Why is it such a problem if a walking belt wears out? Uh, the big danger is that if the walking belt wears out and you keep using it because you may not notice any symptoms immediately, it puts an enormous strain on the drive motor and the circuit board that drives that motor. You can blow out the circuit board, and you can shorten the lifespan of the drive motor, or just overheat it, which will cause the bearings to fail prematurely in the drive motor. So that's why the walking belt is such a big deal. So I have a pile of belts here of various kinds. We'll start with probably one of the worst, which is a lifespan belt. It's really kind of hard to tell that it's worn from the underside. Even, not that the top looks any different than a brand new one. I mean, this one's dirty because it's been sitting around for a while, but uh, there's really no noticeable wear, both visibly or even from the touch. Maybe a little bit, you can see a little bit of a color change from the edge to right about here. And similar on this side, you come in a couple inches. The wear and tear for a walking belt is typically in the middle third. So if this is the left and this is the right, it's this middle third section here that will experience the most wear, because when you walk on a treadmill, you don't walk on the edges, you walk pretty much right in the middle. So that's where the wear and tear happens. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Lifespan walking belts, don't, and I'm talking about the 800 model, the 1000 model, the 1200 model, the 2000, the 2250, the 3000, and I believe even the 4000 all use basically the same type of belt. They're different sizes because they're different size treadmills, but the belt itself, the belting material, I believe is all the same, and it's very poor. I've had little old ladies wear them out in a year, and they've been lubricating them regularly, and they just don't hold up very well. Now, I have, in contrast, this is a lifespan belt from a 7000, which I don't know if they make it anymore, but it's a very heavy duty belt. You can see how much stiffer it is than this one. This one just is very limp, whereas this one is very stiff and very thick in comparison. The TR7000 lifespan is a light commercial treadmill, whereas the regular lifespan treadmills use this one, or this type of belting, and it typically lasts, like I said, maybe 100 hours, maybe 200 or 300 if you're lucky, whereas this typically goes over 1,000, maybe 1,500. The problem with telling exactly how long they last, the Lifespan 7000 uses a little battery in the display. When that battery goes dead, you lose all the accumulated hours and miles, so it's really hard to tell what kind of the exact longevity of this belt. But from what I've seen, it does last quite a lot longer than their other belts. So that's lifespan out of the way. Let's talk about JHT. Now, JHT probably doesn't sound familiar to you. They are the parent company behind Horizon, Vision, Matrix, Livestrong, and some other names. I've done a lot of work on their machines, and right here I've got a few of their worn-out belts from various models. This one, I believe, is from a T101. The T101, T102, and 303 all use the same type of belt as each other, just different sizes, and it's the same thickness as each other. Whereas when you go to the Horizon 7.0, 7.4, 7.8, they all use a slightly thicker belt, but it's the same type of belt. Then you go up to the Matrix retail, and the TF50, the T50, the TF30, the T30. Again, same type of belt, just a little bit thicker than the Horizon 7.0, 7.4, 7.8. So basically, they're three versions of the same. Especially on this belt, you can see all this fuzz. And it really even gets to be, you get these even balls of fuzz when they wear out. So that's one big thing to look for. Because I believe the backing material is either cotton or polyester in all three of these belts. So you'll get this kind of, this is a tiny piece. You'll get handfuls of the stuff when it wears out. So when you start to see that, and it's not always easy to see, sometimes you have to take the cover off of the hood, the cover off of the motor to kind of see inside what's going on in there. You'll see that fuzz start to accumulate, and that's a sign that these are wearing out. So as you can see, I've got this one lasted about 424 hours. And I gotta say, it all depends. I don't think there's a big difference between the three as far as longevity. I'm just looking through my notes here. For all three, 3 to 600 hours of use, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 miles. And obviously, lubricating them helps them last longer, but even lubricated, they tend not to go much longer than that. So that's kind of the most you can expect out of them. They are lubricated with silicone, so make sure you keep lubricating those to make them last as long as they can. In that same brand, Vision, over the last few years, has switched over to a. They used to be a residential and light commercial, and now they've gone just light commercial. And the T600 and the T600E, which are basically the same treadmill except for a different display, they use a maintenance-free belt. You can see how there's this. They're pre-waxed from the factory, using a method that you can't really add more wax to once you get it out of the factory. And they hold up even worse than the silicone belts. They are much thicker and tougher looking, but the few that I've already replaced have lasted just a few hundred hours. One of them lasted less than 131 hours, and it was worn out. So less than 1,000 miles. One of them only 500 miles, and you could see that the worst of the two had big chunks out of it, and this was less than 200 hours of use. So I do not recommend that. Even if you wanted one of these for your home, that's a very short period of time for this to last. As you can see, it is a Habessit, and it's probably a little more visible here, legible. Habessit belt. I'm not saying Habessit makes bad belts, but this particular belt, something did not go right. Either they didn't wax it properly at the factory, even though it says it's waxed, or maybe this particular belt is just not very good. But I do not recommend that treadmill just because the belts are so bad. In contrast, here is a very old belt from a commercial Precor treadmill. You can see it has a lot of wear and tear. The treadmill was about 20 years old. The belt had been replaced about 10 years ago, so this is about 10 years of wear and tear. I don't have exact mileage or anything like that. Because the treadmill is so old, it lost its memory, so it doesn't know how many hours and miles are on it. But clearly, it has many hours and miles on it. It was in a hotel, and it just got beat up a lot. and it held up very well. Again, you can tell it's very stiff. Uh, a stiff belt is difficult. Uh, you think about the rollers that the belt goes around on. If the rollers are very tiny, you need a thinner, more supple belt. A stiffer belt just really couldn't make that curve, those tight curves, so you have to have larger rollers, which means you have a more expensive treadmill. So you can't really put a stiff belt on a tiny little residential treadmill. A couple other belts here. This one. This is a Landis belt. Again, it's hard to tell that it's worn out. There's not a lot of visible change in it from the middle to the edge. But typically, Landis belts would last quite a long time. In a home, it would last 1,500 to 2,000 hours of use. You're thinking 5, 6, 7,000 miles easily. However, recently I've been having to change some of the new ones after about 300 hours. Unfortunately, Landis doesn't have the same service department anymore. The experienced technicians they had in-house are gone, and now they have new people who don't know anything, and they basically refuse to address the issue of why their belts are wearing out so quickly. It's pretty annoying, but that's what happens. So how do you tell if your belt is worn out? Sometimes there will be symptoms. Perhaps the breaker trips in your house, or the breaker trips on the treadmill itself, and you're able to let it cool down, reset the breaker, and then use it again. Don't ignore that sign. Address the issue, because if it keeps happening, you're going to blow out, as I mentioned, the circuit board or the motor. More likely the circuit board, and then that repair, instead of just repairing and replacing the belt and perhaps the deck that's underneath it, now you're stuck replacing a circuit board as well, which is a lot more expensive. If you want to do some more in-depth testing, you can use something like this. This is a tester that you can plug into the wall, although it'd be easier to plug it into an extension cord, a heavy-duty extension cord, plug the treadmill in here. As you can see, this one's broken. Then you'll hit the, let's see if I can focus, the amp button, and that will give you the amperage of the treadmill. And what you'd be looking for amperage is you would test it at a speed. I like to test at 5 miles an hour. Test what it does by itself with nobody on the machine, just running it at 5 miles an hour. And most treadmills are going to be pulling between 2 and 4 amps just by itself. Then you get on the belt at 5 miles an hour and then see what happens. It's obviously going to go up, but by how much is the real thing that you're concerned about. If it goes up to 6, 7, that's not a big deal. That would be expected. If it goes up to 8, 9, or over 10, 10 is certainly a problem. The belt should be replaced. 8 might not be too bad, depending on what the beginning. To go from 4 to 8 is not that big of a deal. To go from 2 to 8 is a bigger deal, and it also depends on your size. I'm about 160. If you're heavier or lighter, obviously your numbers are going to be different, and you have to take that in consideration. If you don't want to invest in one of these, and you still kind of want a feel for how worn your belt is, you can just basically turn the treadmill off and push the belt with your feet. And as I mentioned, usually all the wear and tear is in the middle third of the belt. So if you push the belt with your feet and you're pushing and you're just walking in this very narrow spot of belt on the left or on the right, and it feels kind of easy to push. I mean, it'll still take some effort to push the belt, don't get me wrong. But then when you switch over to the middle and it really drags, like it's a lot harder to push now that you're pushing in the middle as opposed to the edge, that's a sign that your belt is worn, because it's going to be wearing in that middle third. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you can put that in the comments. Thanks.